What a delight, what a pleasure. Thank you so much for the opportunity to actually be here at Ake. It's an honor. It's an honor and it's like a lifetime come true. So Lola, thank you so much for that opportunity. I'll be forever grateful. The whole month, I'll be just telling people where I was. And they will be just looking at me in admiration, pure admiration, the admiration they never felt before. So to my wonderful guests, my first and most important question, how are you today?
Oh, I'm well and excited to be at Ake, like you. So thank you to Lola Shonyen and to the organizers of this fabulous festival, and thank you for inviting me to this panel.
I'm great. This is my second Ake. The first time I came here, in 2016, actually, I presented a short film. So this time it's wonderful to just be here with a book, you know. Yeah.
So welcome to the line of authors now. I must welcome you to the club, right? Or actually, the fellow authors must welcome him now. He's no longer just a filmmaker, but now he's also one of your peers. So, beautiful. Beautiful is actually the beginning of your title. Such a beautiful thing to behold. And when I was assigned, or when I was given your title, and I thought, oh, wow, what a beautiful title. And even the cover, beautiful. I thought like, oh, wow, what does it have in store for me? Turns out, it's a little bit deceiving, right? Tell me a little bit about this wonderful title and the wonderful way how you managed to conjure so much pain and tragedy in one book.
So the book was actually in gestation for a very long time. And it started out as a short story. You know, and I was sort of working through it, and I was at a stage in my journey as a writer where I was trying to pay attention to language, you know, I had just read Cormac McCarthy's The Road, and that book was really, you know, just life-changing. It sort of opened my eyes to, you know, the possibilities of what literature can be. And so I worked on this short story, and it just kept growing. And I got to a point where I felt it's probably time to make it a book. And the more I was doing it, you know, I was sort of thinking about, you know, I was interested in things like wonder, but I was also thinking about human suffering and how people sort of navigate that. And I guess the older I got, the more I just felt that sometimes, you know, arriving at some kind of meaning or some kind of light, there is a slog through the darkness, and sometimes, you know, the brightness of the light, you know, and how you appreciate it is determined by the darkness of the tunnel, you know, if that makes sense.
You said something very important. You said that changed your life. Mention the book again that actually changed your life, because I'm always curious to find out what is the book that changed people's life. Because usually I just go to church and it's just one book they mention to me.
It changed my life as a writer. And it's called The Road by Cormac McCarthy.
Thank you. And you said actually suffering, how people navigate around it. And that was very intrinsic in this book, that you see suffering, you see bravery, you see a journey from devotion to survival instincts too. And when I say bravery, I mean bravery to claim the right to defend one's life in a way that is not expected when you see the beginning of the character's story. Was that something that you had in mind particularly, or it evolved as you kept on writing?
So when it was at the short story stage, it was primarily, it was one character. And that character, you know, it's a character that opens the novel, the character called Dunka. And Dunka is the older, you know, he's the eldest in a family of 4 siblings. And as I was beginning to expand it, you know, it just made sense that, you know, I should sort of open it up and also look at, you know, the perspectives from, you know, of the other siblings. And it was a very slow, very, very organic process. And I can't say that there was a certain, I don't know, I think it sort of came together in a way that was unexpected. I can't say that, oh, this was the agenda and I knew exactly what I was doing. It sort of came together very, very organically.
This was very much felt because, as you say, you have your characters, Dunka, the 4 siblings, and they seem to be let's say, the lead characters. And as a reader, you feel like you are basically plunged or plugged into their individual lives. But wherever they get into, they meet other characters who have interesting stories to tell as well, and they get an individual life with a turn that was totally unexpected. And I feel like the character development, so you had more than just 4, and thought like, if more characters come, then that's totally fine. Then they have the space to tell their story in your book?
Yeah, no, so, it was 4 siblings, and one of the things that interested me was sort of having, so for a little more context, the background of the book, it's essentially, it's about a community that is overtaken by a strange pestilence, so it is a book about an epidemic. And I'll just say, it was a complete coincidence. I've been working on it for, almost a decade before Corona came along. But I was interested in the idea of characters that were navigating this situation and were connected in different ways. So the four siblings were already they were already in the picture. But I was also, I kind of wanted to open it up a little. So one of the other characters is a lover to one of Dunka's sisters. And then the other character is essentially an outsider, and I think I wanted to sort of bring about that outsider's perspective because it is a very closed society. The rest of the world sort of shuts them off and doesn't really, just give a damn about them. They literally build barriers around this community to contain what is happening because they don't understand it. So I wanted also the perspective of someone that was outside of that, that was then dropped into it, right into the middle of it. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Well, the Daughters of Nnadi. How shall I start? The story is, in the first place, it is very powerful. It is very powerful. It tells the story of a woman, a queen, and it is very much interwoven with historical facts. Somebody that has no roots, does not know anything or not a lot about South Africa, learns a lot about this, is very much introduced into its history, into his kingdoms. And what was particularly intriguing was Queen Nnadi's forcefulness and the way she describes the wrongfulness that has been done to her and the consequences. So, first of all, why Queen Nnadi?
Well, Queen Nnadi, as you've rightly said, she was the mother of one of the greatest kings, I think, of all time. So a bit of context, if you're not a reader or follower of South African history, King Shaka was one of the kings that actually put together the Zulu nation. So prior to the reign of King Shaka in the 1800s, the Zulu polity was not, a nation as such, but it was a conglomeration of smaller surnames, So Queen Nnadi's people, the Mhlongos, they had their own area and so on. So King Shaka is the one who put them together. And of course, that story of King Shaka is very controversial because some people are saying, he was a warmonger. Other people are saying, no, he wanted to unite the people of Southern Africa to be able to deal with the onslaught of colonialism, right? But what people who follow that history know is that King Shaka's mother, actually, Queen Nnadi, was the one who was very instrumental in how he was raised, because she was a woman who was very outspoken and was not very popular in how the history is recorded, right? So some people say, Uguti Indlovukazi, Queen Nnadi was, an amazing person and so on, and others were like, no, this woman caused chaos and havoc in the Zulu royal house, And there is a story that actually on her deathbed, because of how the Zulu royal house treated her, they didn't want to accord her the status of the mother of the oldest child of King Senzangakhona, you know, because as the mother of the oldest, she should have had a certain role, you know. So I don't know what happened. They were fighting, and she wasn't. So they said on her deathbed, she then cursed her descendants. So that's where the story starts, you know, because now she's in the afterlife, she has cursed generations, you know, and she's causing torrents of rain, she's causing violence, she's causing, you know, governments to collapse because her spirit is wandering in the afterlife, and she's just enraged, you know. So can she then call on her descendants, the three characters, Kia, 100 years later, Amangwe 200 years later, you know. So I went back in time. It's a little bit of a different novel to yours, because I went way 200 years ago, you know, because I'm interested in historical narratives and how they help to focus you, you know, when you have a dilemma. Because I still feel, you know, we as women today, you know, in South Africa, in the south of Africa, still grapple with a lot of the issues, you know, in terms of how society says who you are and how you should behave. We still grapple with some of those issues, you know. So that's why I was intrigued by that historical figure, you know, and how through space and time, she navigated and said, look, this is how the world may see me, but this is my contribution to the Zulu kingdom.
Yes, actually, you said something very important, because when I read this book, obviously it was labeled historical, but then it felt very contemporary in terms of the issues, the challenges that you find yourself as in the struggles of being a woman. But then, however, in terms of modern world, in terms of Christianity, in terms of ancestral beliefs, ancestral healing powers, so you navigate very swiftly between those two worlds, and also how it serves as a sort of anchor in those, basically whilst you go through the events of history that have been oppressing, depressing for Black people in South Africa as such. But however, you portray as well also the wealth, how rich the cultures are. So what was your intention to showcase both sides in narrating the historical events, whereby one could just focus on just one side of the dramatic side, so to say?
You know, also, again, for me, I mean, it's a question of resilience, right? Whether it's resilience through a pandemic, or resilience through colonial onslaught, or any kind of situation where you feel like you're under attack, you know? So I'm always interested in those questions of what makes a person or a people resilient, you know? Hence, I'm intrigued by African cultures and African spiritualities, you know. I found a lot, you know, where I'm coming from. I come from South Africa. I grew up in the 70s in a township called Soweto. And we have always used indigenous plants, for example. So when Corona hit, you know, in South Africa, a lot of people were using a herb called umhlonyane, you know. So people just sprung to action, you know. Yes, I mean, I think the default as people, we do want to say, you know, government this and that and whatever. People are like, you know, we are here, umhlonyane is here, we are going to drink it, you know. And of course, when the vaccine comes as well, you know, you take the vaccine as well, you know. But I'm interested in those questions of resilience. And I'm interested in indigenous strategies to make people resilient. So even in historic times, as I said, that my story is more about, you know, Queen Nnadi and in the Zulu nation, you know. But for me as a mother who was living through Corona, because that's when I wrote the book, you know, and I'm dealing with children who are scared, you know, you are dealing with yourself, you are scared, you know. You think of situations that were really, really hectic, you know, and you draw on the narratives of resilience and, you know, how culture can give you strategies, how spiritualities can give you strategies in a real practical way. So yeah, it's both an interest, but it's also a way of seeing and a way of framing.
I think when we say resilience, this is what connects the two of your novels, because both stories manifest resilience, or the need for resilience in that sense. However, you choose very different angles, because for some of your characters, I was surprised. I loved the turn, but I wondered, where did that come from? Where did that come from that now she's defending herself after receiving beatings over a decade? And then finally she decided, is it my life or his life? So I like as well how you brought that one up. So what do you think when you hear resilience and spirituality as source of, a source of it, African spirituality?
So I mean, you know, resilience is, you know, it's the winters, it's the toils, it's the things that you endure, you know, and it's the process. It's, you know, it's that passing through a fire, right? That sort of, I don't know, it brings out, you know, the qualities, or, you know, and it not to sort of glamorize, you know, suffering in any way, of course, you know, but things happen, you know, things happen to you. You live through life, and life hits you, you know, in so many different ways that you just can't imagine, and, you know, and you just, you know, you go through it, you know, and I think one of the ways that we sort of, you know, just as human beings, is that there is a huge, we have a huge ability to sort of come out of it, you know, much stronger. It just makes me think of, you know, where I'm currently living and studying, you know, in a part of British Columbia, and how there are these pine trees, you know, they're called ponderosa pines, you know, and they're ancient trees. And because of sort of the nature and the climate, you know, the climate and just how given the, you know, that terrain is to wildfires and everything, these trees have evolved to the point that they're actually fire resistant. You know, and so when the wildfires come, you know, and they sort of burn, you know, they burn the bark and everything, the trees also have a scent, you know, so I don't know, they're these sort of, you know, remarkable things that have come out of, you know, just the difficulties. I mean, in terms of, you know, spirituality, so, you know, the book, so for me, part of the book is me trying to, I guess, like, engage with part of my maternal history, my maternal culture, you know, culture passed through my mother. And the book features a language called Ngas. And Ngas is you know, it's a language in Plateau State in northern Nigeria. And I'm not fluent in Ngas, but I was very interested in, you know, if language is sort of a container of worldviews, and, you know, I was interested in sort of engaging with that a little, and because I felt very cut off, you know, from I just haven't engaged with it as much, you know. I understand it to an extent, but I'm not fluent, and so in a way I'm also sort of cut off from the concept, you know, and the understanding and the spiritualities that exist. So the book was my own poor attempt, I think, at sort of trying to, you know, engage with that a little bit more.
Good point, language. Language has been an important aspect as well in your book, because you use 4 languages?
Yeah, I use 3 languages. So I use isiZulu, Setswana, there's a bit of Sesotho, and what you have just said, you know, really touched my heart, because, you know, I find as well that, you know, with current generations, there is that danger of the languages slipping away. And I think for me as well, my very deliberate use of isiZulu, my very deliberate use of Setswana, you know, was a way of, yes, infusing the textures and infusing the worlds that I was talking about, and hopefully for the younger readers and the generation that's writing now, you know, they can then feel the power of that language, you know. One of the young writers actually who's writing in South Africa wrote a beautiful book about names as a superpower, you know. So if my name is Nokuthula, the mother of peace, you know, that is a superpower in terms of what we want to do, you know, creating peace and prosperity, you know. So I'm very deliberate about the names that are used in the book, you know, Ukia, who is the flower of Botswana, you know, Uju, the sweet one, it means the one who is sweet. So Queen Nnadi as well, her name meant the sweet one, and she says in the book that at her core, she is sweet, you know, but one cannot stand aside when one is ill-treated, you know. So I very much wanted to explore justified anger, you know, but also for every action there's a reaction. So somebody does you wrong and you justifiably act out in anger, you know, but then what happens, you know? So in anger she cursed her descendants. You know, she said for future generations, you know, there will be torrents of rain, poverty, and so on. And then what? You see, the anger was justifiable, and she wanted the Zulu royal house, the Mhlongo royal house's descendants to feel what she felt. You see, and she was angry. You know, in that moment, you let that anger reign, and we've all been in that situation where somebody does something terrible to you. You know, and you want to punch. You know, and you want violence as a solution. You know, it's cathartic. Violence is cathartic. You know, and sometimes it's unavoidable. But for every action, there's a reaction. You know, then where do you go from that point? I also wanted to ask that question. That yes, as the daughters of Queen Nnadi, we are enraged that patriarchy persists still, you know. But what are the strategies of bringing society with us? How do we bend society to make a place for women to contribute in politics, in medicine, in every specter of society, you know, without now these wars that are raging, you know, in most parts of the world that I've been to, certainly in Southern Africa, there is a war raging between men and women. You know, how do we resolve that war?
Yeah, wow, thank you very much, because I definitely see the anger. It is felt through. You start reading it, and already the beginning, which I would like to ask you now to read maybe 2 pages so that the audience have an idea, a feel of. And having said so, we are talking also about resilience. It would be nice if each one of you could think what was a particular strategy that he or she has developed for resilience, and then maybe can share so that we all benefit from our strategies of resilience. So please.
Alexandra, thank you so much, you know, for this opportunity. So I just thought, look, let me just read the first, maybe read the first page where it's actually the voice of Queen Nnadi speaking, because I wondered that this woman who lived 200 years ago, you know, how did she sound? You know, there was no Twitter back then or whatever that can capture, you know, you know, but we all know about her. So I was curious as to how she sounded and what were her issues, you know. So this is the book, The Daughters of Nnadi, published by Paivapo, Zukiswa Werner's Paivapo. It's on sale outside. So this is 1827. It's Queen Nnadi on her deathbed, right? Part of the prologue. And it's in a place in KwaZulu-Natal. So in South Africa, it's still there, the Valley of 1,000 Hills. Yeah? So it's 1827. My people, I have no regrets. I, Queen Nnadi of the Zulu nation, have lived a life anointed by the ancestors. I was chosen to birth a king and lead my people. I called him Umlilwana, the fire to warm my heart and hands. But little did I know he would later turn into a flame that would burn brightly, illuminating the future of our nation. He would become an inferno that would rage ferociously for 1 decade, but forever changing the histories of many nations across the African continent. Yes, my son gave me a life like no other. Shaka Senzangakhona. They called him Ilembe leqamanye amalembe ngokukhalipha. They called him Unodumehlezi kaMenzi, the one who gets famous although he's sitting idle. Poets are liars. When was my son ever sitting idle? the African ant, ever frenetic, would have been ashamed into a stupor of helplessness by Shaka's boundless energy, his tirelessness, the sharp spear of the Zulu nation. Indeed, even as I birthed him, welcoming him into the world, I could sense that he would raise me up above nations, Ushaka Gashayegi, undefeated in life and in death. There, the poets were right. My people, I will say it again, I have no regrets about my life. I have lived and loved and reigned over the great people of the heavens, uZulu, from the north, where uSoshangane of the Nxumalo people established his nation, along the mountains of Ukahlamba, in the easternmost part, where the valleys are deep and green and alive with the beauty of the heavens, where the hippos groan and grunt, and the titioye bird sings so melodiously, along the coast of Empangeni, KwaDukuza, KwaBulawayo, where the herds of buffalo can be found gamboling joyfully, as if taunting the lions who sit on their haunches, biding their time, waiting for a stupid buffalo calf to stray from the herd. A land so beautiful, it seems to stop time in its tracks and demand admiration from all in its presence. The land of the Zulu people, where heaven is indeed on earth, and many nations have fought over who has the legitimate claim to this breathtaking, fertile land.
What can I say? Can you imagine now how I was slightly feeling when I read it? It was cold. I come from Hamburg, Germany. It was cold, gray, and I was reading this, and it suddenly gave me this kind of, this was my normal posture, and then I read it, and this was my after posture that I carried through the day. But now that you have read it out, the power, you've just filled the entire room. Although we did not understand every word, but the emotions that were carried through. Thank you so much for this. Thank you so much for this powerful account of Queen Nnadi and sharing this with us.
Well, land is very spiritual, I think, for a lot of African people, you know, and certainly in South Africa, we share a lot of that with Zimbabwe, where, you know, if you go back in time and imagine the battles that have raged, you know, and Nnadi as well as a mother, that she wanted to secure a future for her children, you know. We have been talking about migration, so I'm always wanting to center and focus the point of view of the mother, you know, because it becomes intense in a different way when you are responsible for lives and to ensure that they have a space to call home, you know. So I went back there and said, here is the mother of this incredible king, you know. How was she feeling when these battles for this land were raging, you know? What were her issues, you know? How did she want her children to live and to be, you know? Because she had other children apart from Shaka. Shaka is the most famous, you know? But it was that mother's heart of wanting to secure the land for your children.
Land is actually a good point, securing space, where you talk about how to secure space. In your book, it's so seen how space has been taken and narrowed very much down. Maybe you'd like to read something out of it.
So a little context. This portion I'm reading is from the perspective of a character called Panmun. Panmun is Dunka's sister. She's the second born in the family. And she and her lover, Zumji, they're actually planning to try to escape from this, you know, space. And so they have where I'm picking up from a point where they're supposed to meet at a rendezvous. So I'll read a couple of pages. Her legs carried her to the first place where she hoped to find him. The front door was locked. She went around the house to the backyard where he slaughtered and skinned his game. The slab of concrete permanently tinged with the crimson of blood, the long branch of a smooth dead tree from which he suspended larger animals for skinning, the spit where he roasted or singed hair off hide, the empty room where he stored his traps and hunting tools. An ancient motorcycle stood defiantly against a far wall, its tires deflated and useless, Zumji's father's motorcycle. The door to one of the grain silos was open, and the chattering of maize against metal was coming from inside. She waited. A few seconds passed, and a boy of about 13, wearing only a pair of shorts, climbed out. There was a bowl of maize in his hand. He nearly dropped it when he saw Panmun. "Good afternoon, Auntie," he said. He seemed small for his age, as were most kids these days. The whites of his eyes were inflamed, like he had been crying. "Tongzum, where is Zumji?" "I haven't seen him." "Where's your sister?" "She's at home." "And how is your father?" Tongzum paused and looked at the ground. "He died this morning. He drank rat poison in the kitchen." The effort to hold himself together, his voice, his body, the bowl of maize, was as broad and plain as a mountain. Panmun felt it in her throat and swallowed. She had just told herself she had to stop caring, but she could not help it as she went to Tongzum and hugged him. He remained still for a second and then pulled away. "I have to take this so my sister can eat something." Panmun nodded. She watched as he locked up and left. The next place was the coppice, where Zumji had taken her to show her the carefully concealed rickshaw. She had stared at it that day, the paint bright yellow and bright green, like sunlight and grass, like a field of golden flowers. How could something so ordinary have become so wondrous? That was when he had declared with the flair of an adventurer poet that they should run away and start a new life somewhere else. The rickshaw would carry them wherever they wanted to go, and if they were without the sickness, nobody would fear them or want to harm them. They could get a pastor somewhere to marry them. Zumji could bring along his trapping tools and make a living off the ground, buy a plot of land and build a nice clean house for them to live in. That was supposed to be the future. She found the rickshaw among the bushes. There were things in it, things she had not seen the last time. Sacks containing food, a jerrycan of gas, Zumji's tools. These things could mean he was dead, or he had been delayed and was still planning to come for her. Zumji once explained the strategy he used in laying his traps. He said that patience was the most important thing, learning to wait. It could take hours or days, but as long as a creature was alive, it would come. As long as Zumji was alive, he would return to the rickshaw. The question was, how long would she have to wait?
Wow, thank you for this. One thing that struck me about the characters as well, despite their sufferings, despite their sorrow, they still find a place in their hearts to bring out compassion. And throughout the book, I have the feeling this is also a way of resilience, that despite in which situation you are, that the capability of still feeling compassion for others that suffer, that was very striking to me in your book. So, coming to you, my beautiful audience, I hope you're ready for your questions, but also to share strategies of resilience. It's a give and take here. So, yes, please, the lady in red.
Thank you so much. Nokuthula, could you speak a little bit to the type of historical research you did, and if you found anything that surprised you? And I just wanted to double check, is Nnadi the mother of Shaka Zulu, the one that we also know about?
Yes. So Queen Nnadi is the mother of Shaka Zulu. And thank you for that question. My goodness, and I must be careful what I say because my publisher is sitting right here. And Zuki is the one, I did 8 drafts of this novel. And part of why I did so many drafts was because I think at the beginning, because I love history, I love biography. I'm fascinated by the character of Queen Nnadi, I've met, in fact, the previous king who passed away, King Zwelithini. I had met him, and he had told me some of the stories. So I use a combination of oral narratives, and even people talking, just generally, they know that the history of the Mhlongos, so my maternal grandfather is a Mhlongo, so don't go to the royal house looking for me, they don't know me. But, it's just a surname that is similar. So people with that similar surname will know the history of the Mhlongos, So my grandfather, for example, knew about the curse and so on. I did a lot of reading, just historical books and whatever. But the beauty of an editor is that they will tell you when you are now dry and historical and not interested, because you have to weave a story at the end of the day, And I was very, very fortunate that Zuki did organize for me a workshop with the great Buka shortlisted Maza Mangeste. I have a certificate. I do have a certificate. I sent it to my publisher. I said, see, I completed the course. Because here they teach you, don't bore people with historical facts. Because a novel is first and foremost entertaining, you see. Yes, obviously it was for me to keep myself together through the pandemic, I was trying to draw on those strategies of resilience, but you don't want to bore people. So that was a challenge for me, because I can give you we can sit even outside, I'll tell you all the nice history, but all of that had to be thrown out, because you are not in school. It's not a history lesson, right? Yes, it's a book, it's fiction. You are reading it to be entertained.
Thank you. Next time, bring the certificate for all of us to look at it.
I do. For something guests.
No, we put it on the screen. Yes, please. In the middle.
It's not that serious. So, your novel, I'm reading the dedication. It says, for my mother, Esther Kassit Moi Turaki, you carried my dreams so far, now may they carry you. I got the novel yesterday, and I've not read it yet. But when I saw this dedication, I was like, this is the most heartfelt dedication I've ever read. So now when you don't go, when your dreams don't come true, I just want to know, what was the first thing you did for Momsi?
Thank you. It's Kassit Moi. Kassit Moi. But
take as much time as you need. This is the beauty of Aki. We share emotions here together. Let us take another question whilst we ponder about it. Madam, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. My question is for Umar. I don't know if it's an appropriate time. I can come back later. Okay. You're known as a filmmaker, and so I wanted to know, what was it like for you transitioning from filmmaker to author? Was it difficult or was it easy?
First of all, I'll just start by saying that it's never easy. But I know a lot of people think that I actually started out as a filmmaker because basically for like an entire decade of my life, that was sort of what I was, pursuing aggressively. But really my oldest dream was this, I've been wanting to be an author since I was 14. And filmmaking came along and it became a way to pay the bills. I worked as a screenwriter in the industry and also a director for hire. I feel, so I haven't had much of a transition. Rather, I feel like I've been sort of navigating like a liminal space between these two, because I've often felt very conflicted, as if these two sides of my creativity were like butting their heads against each other. And I was also always trying to think about how do I resolve it. And so as a result, I think I compartmentalized my imagination. And I felt like there were certain stories that I could only tell as a filmmaker, and the only stories I could tell as a writer. And I made a few short films, some I'm very proud of course, with the distance of a few years, you look at them. Some of them were made with very, very difficult under difficult circumstances. And unlike writing, where you just sit and invent something and write it without, any sort of real world concerns, when you're writing a film, you think about the budget. How, would I have the money to shoot this? Can I get it? And I think that sort of, put constraints on my writing. And so I'm currently in a place, and for me, it's still a work in progress in the sense that I'm trying to see how these two sides of me sort of come together. I'm trying to see how I give myself permission to tell stories that just sort of, are fluid and breathe and, to just create fully. But just back to the question, because I've been, it's, my mom is my hero, honestly. I just, everything I am, everything I have, is because of the sacrifice that she has made. Many of the characters, especially the female characters, and I didn't realize that was what was happening, but sort of looking back, I realized that many of them and the strength that they have and the resilience that they have, she's the model, it was from her that I got them. And I remember when, when the book exists as an audiobook, and I remember when, we were having conversations about, I had a list of voice actors and everything, and I sort of narrowed it down, and there was one in particular, and I just looked at it and I listened to her voice, and it made me realize that the voice of this book is a female voice, and that's why I chose that, went with a female narrator, right? So yeah, that's
great. Thank you for the question. Thank you for sharing this. I think you've all kind of made us remember us of the people who love us, our mothers, and what strengthened us. So thank you for that. Zukiswa.
Nokuthula, I know you're, oh, all right, sorry. Nokuthula, I know Daughters of Nnadi has been staged. Do you have any plans for it to go beyond the stage or to do other things with it? And Umar, any plans to do a film adaptation of such a beautiful thing to behold? Because I know lately I've noticed with Netflix and Showmax a lot of adaptations of books to film. Do you have any plans as a filmmaker?
Okay, so the question that Zukiswa Vena has asked, the background is that Zukiswa Vena and I, when we launched the book, we actually did a dramatized a reading of it, where I was subsequently fired as Queen Nnadi because of because of certain of my actions. But the director now wants to take it on the road without me. But Nokuthula Msimang. So hopefully that will come together. And of course, we are applying for funding for a film, because it would be incredible. There's actually at the moment a film called Ilembe, which is on King Shaka. It's a series, it's a TV series called Ilembe. And if you check on YouTube, in South Africa we call it Bomb, 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 Bomb. But it was a film on King Shaka, but the framing was a bit, the gaze was quite wide. But it was informative in terms of, some of the facts which were on point, So, short answer, yes. Yeah.
Yes, one of the, even in terms of like talking to film agents, film TV agents and everything, there has been a lot of, so yes, I would love to see this, exist in another format, a sort of, little fantasy that I like to imagine is thinking of it as like a Studio Ghibli film, and with Angas rather than like Japanese, but this, the same kind of style of animation for those that are familiar with, films that, the studio puts out. But we've been getting a lot of, challenges in terms of, so apparently, right now, like the market, for example, isn't hot for pandemic novel, and things like that. And that's something that has really sort of affected, I think the book sort of, the book's chances at being optioned and things like that. But I'm imagining alternative scenarios. It's a book that has a very local texture. It's a very particular part of Plateau State, not even Jos, for people that know Jos, it's outside Jos. It's, sort of inspired, the landscape and all of that is inspired by, the terrain of, my mother's village and the local government that she comes from. So I like to imagine a situation where, probably get some money together or something and, get a good, I think I sort of shirk at, I hesitate at, the idea of directing my own work as a writer because I feel like it's too much power. So anyway, that's something I'm still thinking about, but yeah.
Thank you, thank you. So we have, I think, time for one more question or someone who would like to share strategies on resilience. I haven't forgotten that one. Yes, isn't it? Yeah, it was nearly neglected. Any other questions or strategy suggestions? No? Oh, yes? All right.
My question is, as a prose writer, I have always wondered if the subject matter comes first before the plot, or if the plot comes first before the subject matter. Do you write after knowing what you want to write about, or you just develop the plot before thinking about what the plot will be about?
I think, it's, back to Nokuthula's point about the fact that you are actually, as a fiction writer, I feel that my primary responsibility is to tell a story and to tell it well. And oftentimes, that, that sort of, I think it's that desire, to sort of write something that people want to read. But at the same time, it's a voice that you have, and you're saying something with it, And if you're saying something, it might as well be something that you actually believe in or something that you feel strongly about. So sometimes, you'll get an idea and it may feel hot, or, it may feel like, oh, this is something I want to do, or I want to talk about this issue. But oftentimes I find that, it's sort of, I don't know, sometimes I think I want to say one thing, and by the time I'm sort of at the other end of the book and it's done, I'm saying something else, because I've sort of worked through the process of, understanding it. So I think it's important to, if you're going to sort of, if you have a message and that seems to be the important thing, you might as well just write, an article or something, right? But a story it has the power to do so much, it contains so much. And I often like to sort of make the distinction between having a message and a story having a message and a story having meaning, And I think meaning is a more interesting and it's a more powerful way of looking at it. I don't know if that answers your question, but.
Wow. So that's I was just going to say that that's a very difficult question. I never quite know how to answer it. Because I, for one, I'm quite a chaotic writer. I start anywhere and end anywhere. you know. And a book which anchored me was titled something along the lines of, you know, there's like a million ways or something to start your story or to get story or whatever, you know. And I'm literally that person where it can be a piece of gossip, it can be a smell, it can be music, and I never know where I'm, you know, it's like being on the waves of the ocean. You never know where you're gonna land. Are you facing this way? Are you facing that way, you know? And first drafts, yeah. They are not pretty.
Great. Hashtag first drafts, they are not pretty. Wow, thank you so much for this great audience. Thank you so much, Nokuthula. Thank you so much, Umar. It was such a pleasure to meet you. Now in person, I already had the feeling when I was talking to you on phone, and it was an absolutely honor. May you continue to be gifted and have all the stories that you would tell, and we get all the books to read. They're available downstairs, and don't be stingy. Buy some for your friend or your family members.